welcome to another episode of Branching Out with Sierra. Today we're on episode 8, From Sunrise to Success, The Path to Lifelong Learning, and we have Mark Kelly with us here today. Today we're going to be talking about personal and professional growth through continuous learning. And before we get started with Mark, I want to tell you a little bit about his background. So Mark is originally from Elkins, West Virginia, so fellow West Virginia mountaineer. Graduated from Elkins High School in 1978 and then Davis and Elkins College in 1985 when he met and married his wife, Betsy Mitchell. At the time, he now has 2 grown sons and has been in Virginia ever since 1986. He worked at BK Office Supply from 1987 until 2016, 29 years, and then worked for Miller's for 3 more years. And now he's been at TWG Insurance, which is where he was when I met him. He's been there for going on 5 years now. So all told, about 40 plus years in sales and sales management. So lots of background, lots of experience to share with us today. But with our focus on growth and lifelong learning, which we know is very important to me, I wanted to ensure that I brought him in on this topic. It's something that every time he and I are together, we dig into what we're reading, how we're continuing to grow. So I knew I wanted to have you on this episode. So thanks for being here, Mark.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate your patience and putting this together. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So same question I always start off with. Same one as always. Do you know? Have you listened enough to know the first question?
Yes.
What is it then? No pressure.
When I first saw myself as a leader.
Yes, you do listen.
I do.
All right. So I am curious. When did you first see yourself as a leader, and what was that moment like for you?
Well, you and I have talked about this before, and are leaders born, or do they learn how to lead? I can look back on my life. It's kind of hard to pin that down, but as early as high school, I assumed the role of leadership, whether I deserved it or not, or I'm not sure what reason the people used to choose me as a captain of a sports team or president of a club or whatever, but it goes back that far. And what I learned then is that it's a big responsibility. People to look to you for answers. Mm-hmm. There's an accountability. What's wrong with your team? What's wrong with this club? What's wrong, with these things that you're in charge of? That accountability showed itself early, and it taught me some valuable lessons for sure.
So can you tell me what it was like to lead at that age for you, though? Without, obviously, you didn't have any training or experience. So what did that look like?
Confusion, probably. For any 17-year-old to be put in a leadership role, is a difficult position. I'm not sure I ever gave it any thought. I think I got pushed into that position because I was a hard worker. I was a good student. So they're like, oh, put him in charge. He'll be fine. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure there was in, like you said, any proper training. But yeah, it was a little confusing at times. And it's like, why am I here? Why are these people looking at me for an answer?
Yeah. Did it feel like a natural fit? I mean, did people tend to follow you, or was that a struggle to get folks to kind of follow you in the direction you were headed?
Yeah, I think it was natural because at that age, if a lot of kids are looking for someone to tell them what to do, I think. Mm-hmm. He had a good idea. We'll do that, because if I raise my hand and say it, they're going to put me in charge, and no one wants that. So again, I'm not sure how I ended up there, but yeah, it wasn't a bad experience. I don't have any nightmares about that.
Good to know. And that's funny you say that about raising your hand. I still have that issue today. If you say something, you contribute, they're like, oh, she could take on that role.
Right.
Is it possible to be a part of something without taking on a leadership role?
Probably is. I don't know what that feels like.
We don't know what it feels like.
We don't know what that feels like. Yeah.
No, not at all. So despite being very well seasoned, I mean, I shared your background, you're well seasoned in your career, you still place a strong emphasis on continuous learning and development, which I love. One of the things I love about you. What drives that mindset for you? Where did that even come from? And then how do you maintain that momentum to continue learning new things?
Well, I've always been competitive. number one. Number two, I had some mentors early on who helped establish that. A lot of people are familiar with Nike's early slogan of "There's no finish line." I've tried to embrace that not only in my careers throughout my life, but also in that continuous education. Always trying to find the next thing, self-help books, whether you're reading that, whether you're taking a class, whether you're furthering your formal education, or whether you're just trying to do your job better, your current position better. I think it's always been rewarding to me to continue down that path, to keep learning, keep trying to get better. And I guess that's, my sports background, the competitive nature. I came from a large family, one of six, so, we were fighting all the time, competing all the time. That was probably a continuous factor in my life. You and I have talked about that. Everyone grows up in a different environment, but early on you think everyone's just like every environment is just like yours. And it wasn't until college that I realized that not everyone had 5 brothers and sisters, and not everyone grew up like I did. And that certainly affected the outlook on that, and from a leadership capacity. I ended up being a middle child. Well, that's pretty competitive. And I had 3 older siblings that were probably more leaders, stronger leaders than I was. But somehow I battled out of there and came away with that outlook.
I'm the youngest of 3, and the only girl, so that was a real battle for me.
Sure, that's uphill all the way.
Yeah, battle for life, right? You, if I'm not mistaken, got into a whole new line of work later in life. I don't know if I want to say the age, give it away. Age
Sure.
60, I'm going to share it. Age
That's
60,
fine.
you got into a new line of work. Well-seasoned. I'm curious as to what led to that shift and what learning had to take place in order for you to kind of, fit into this new role.
So at that point, we BK Office Supply had gone through an acquisition. Miller's acquired them. That's a whole different learning experience we can talk about. But I ended up going to work for TWG and getting into the insurance industry. And it was the first time, there's a license involved, there's some studying involved. It was the first time I'd taken a test that meant something in a long time. But again, no finish line, right? Next phase of my life, let's move into this. There was discussion early on if I needed a license to lead a business development team or an effort there. And we had that conversation, and I said, well, I certainly can't lead folks if I don't have the same accreditation they do. If I don't have the same license. So yes, I need a license, and not only do I need a license, but I need to look at it from every viewpoint. Do I take this virtually? Do I get a book to study from? Do I go to a live class to get this license, to learn this material, to receive this license? Because I knew that I was going to have people that learned differently. Just because I did it one way didn't mean that everyone was going to learn it that way. So that was an education in and of itself. But I embraced that. No finish line. Get back in there, get a license, and it was a positive experience and has been. That continuing education requirement for that is also a great motivator. Every 2 years you have to take X amount of hours depending on your license and your certifications, et cetera. And that's a driving force. It's kind of built in.
Yeah, so I'm curious, why insurance, though? Was there something that drew you to that? Was it through a relationship? You knew someone involved in the business already?
Definitely through relationships. TWG was our insurer when we were BK Office Supply. Chad Bales was our agent. I always respected him. I got to know the folks there at TWG, and we hit it off. As they see, everyone I met was a quality person, provided great service, was very genuine in their contact. So it was fantastic to have the opportunity to come aboard. I knew a few people, and the more that I got to know, the better I felt about it. Gary Nichols described it as, hey, we need a JV coach. We need someone to get some younger players in here, so us older players can, we're going to graduate someday. We're going to need some younger players to take over. So that's been our mission along the way.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a cool transition. And I love that you mentioned learning styles as well, because we all kind of prefer to consume information in different ways, and that training experience could look very different for individuals coming into insurance for the first time. So getting exposure to all the different ways that folks could be learning and even see what would be the best fit for a new employee. I think that was a really, really nice touch coming from a teacher over here.
It's a challenge. It's
Yeah.
part of the challenge.
Yeah. Okay, so another capacity in which I know you is you are an extremely valued chamber ambassador for Top of Virginia Regional Chamber.
Yes.
What's that face? You are
Yes,
you are
indeed.
a valued chamber ambassador. But recently, at one of our ambassador meetings, you were in the spotlight. You got to talk a little bit about your background, kind of what brought you to where you are today, and highlight TWG. And during that presentation, you shared what your philosophy is, and I know we talked about that word. What did you say to me about who has a philosophy? It comes later in life. Like, do you have to be older?
I'm not sure I'm old enough or smart enough to have a philosophy, but maybe an outlook.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I do want to kind of connect some of our conversation back to that today. So
Okay.
I have your philosophy in front of me. Let me know if it's changed.
Okay.
But you said it's important to get up early and get to work, set goals and build in accountability, under promise and over deliver, follow up, help those around you be successful, and finally, give back. So those were the 6 things that you shared in that setting, and I actually have a few questions based off of that
Sure.
today. So how does getting up early and getting to work enhance your productivity and your leadership presence throughout the day?
Well, that's a multifaceted question.
It is.
So getting up early is something I've always done. I feel like if I get up early and start the day, I'm a little bit ahead of my competition. Mm-hmm. You know, when I was in a sales role, I thought that was important. I won business because I was up early and out early and making contacts early. I think working out early gives me a physical edge. It gives me stamina throughout the day. Mm-hmm. Gives me the energy that I need to accomplish the tasks of the day. So I've always treasured that time early in the morning when the house is quiet, especially when our kids were younger, before anyone got up, before there was a crying baby, before there was a teenager doing the paper early in the morning that was due that day. Missing all that, getting above all that, being ahead of all that was always an advantage, I felt like.
Yeah.
And it was, it gave me energy, like I said, not only first thing in the day, but also later in the day when now, as I'm a little more well-seasoned, run out of energy late in the day, it's important that I stay in shape and have that energy throughout the day.
Yeah. So define early. I want to hear what early is for you.
Well, today it was 4:30
Okay.
a.m. Usually it's 5.
Okay.
For some reason, I woke up at 4:30 today like it was, time to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's important. I think that you balance that. You can't stay up till 11 or 12 and get up at 4:30 or 5.
Yeah.
Not more than a day or two in a row anyway. It can be done, but it's that's the norm.
Okay. Okay. So my typical's 5. I sleep 9 to 5
Gotcha.
and pretend to work 9 to 5. That's what I tell myself, at least.
Okay.
But I had to get up at 3:45 yesterday morning in order to travel to Fauquier County to teach a class for Laurel Ridge. That was a little bit of a shock to my system. 3:45 was a little challenging
little
because I normally hit a 3 p.m. wall already as it is. That wall came a little bit earlier yesterday, so the couches out here came in handy.
We're not going to mention the nap word.
I definitely believe
I'm a big
in naps.
fan of naps.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So you get up early. It helps you on the productivity side. Tell me about the leadership presence. Does it change the way that you work or interact with your team?
It does. I don't, and you and I have talked about this. We differ a little bit on this. I'm of the opinion that it's a good thing to let people, especially ones that report to you directly, see that you're up early and responding to their email, practicing what you preach, taking care of admin and communication before the real business day or the real selling hours, depending on what you're doing, of 9 to 5 or 9 to 4. Keep those hours sacred.
9 to 3, is that?
Or whatever, depending on who you are.
Okay.
The making those hours before and after productive. So I don't think that's a bad thing for them to see you there after it, whether you're from home or whatever. I mean, it means something different now. Going into the office early now means opening your laptop from the back porch with a cup of coffee. It's easy to look productive. And of course, you can time emails. You can set them to send at a certain time. I probably don't even know how to do that, but without checking into it, checking into it. So I just get up early and do it anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's a bad thing, and I know you feel differently about that.
I do. So, and maybe this is what helps me to distinguish between the two. I think when it comes to clients, the moment I start answering on the weekends, late at night, super early in the morning, unless it's something that's truly urgent, that I'm training them to believe that I'm always available. Now, if it's a team and you're communicating with your own folks within TWG, I'm like, okay, they can know that you're working outside of hours and you're getting that admin time out of the way before the day technically starts. I fully believe in that. I communicate with my assistant outside of work hours all the time. But it's the client-facing stuff that I'm careful about, because I actually had to pull back on it. When I first started my business, I was available all day, all night, checking my email at all times, and they felt like they had me at their fingertips. Well, then I did not have healthy boundaries, so I wasn't doing the self-care that I needed. So I've had to work on scheduling emails to go out during the work hours, even if I'm secretly working when I'm not supposed to be. The email won't be received until 9 a.m.
Makes perfect sense. I get it.
Yeah. Oh, have I convinced you? I can teach you how to schedule send after.
We drew the distinction between internal and external communication.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think they are very different. So the other thing that you shared in your philosophy is that you stress the importance of setting goals and building accountability. And I'm curious as to how you implement this with your team and what success you've seen as a result of kind of this goal and growth-oriented mindset.
Sure. I think the first step in setting goals is you have to have input. I can't set goals for you. We need to set goals together. And I make sure there's buy-in. That buy-in is critical. If they're going to buy into something that they had input into, they're not going to listen to you dictate goals to them. Tried it, doesn't work. Haven't had success there. Where I find success is if they're involved in that process. You give them feedback along the way. The activities, the behavior that you're exhibiting is contributing to your goals. Look, here's some data. Here's some feedback. Here's some sales. Here's some things that you can show, some rewards for your desired behavior is producing the desired results. So giving them the feedback on that and making sure that they understand the impact that's having. Then along the way, there has to be adjustments. Goals change. A first-year person, a second-year person, new to a position, third year. There are different goals. There are different needs. So I think that's kind of the cycle. You set some goals together. You get buy-in. You give them some feedback. You provide some data. They see the results, and then you change as you need to, depending on where you are in the journey.
Yeah, hold them accountable. And thinking about how goals could change because the priorities of the organization as a whole have changed, not just based on where they are developmentally, but if the priorities have shifted and that's been communicated with the team, how do the goals need to shift to continue to connect and align with the overarching
It's all
mission.
Part of a bigger plan. Absolutely.
So a lot of people that I talk to have difficulty in holding adults accountable. I'm going to throw you off on this one. So
I don't.
how do you hold adults accountable? It can require some difficult conversations sometimes, and a lot of folks that I talk to say, well, they should just know what's expected of them. It's in their job description. Why should I even have to have this conversation? So what does that look like to you, to have an accountability conversation where you have to deliver news that they are not performing the way that you expected they would?
I like to switch things up. So, for instance, I might say, Sierra, let's have a conversation about where we are. How do you think you're doing?
Yes, asking questions.
How do you think you're doing?Here do you see yourself? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you describe your effort? Are you here enough during the day to reach these goals? How would you judge that?
Yeah.
If you switch that, and I've even gone as far as changing seats, here, sit over here. What would you tell yourself 6 months in?
That's coaching, Mark.
I understand
what you're
that.
doing is
I understand
exactly
that.
coaching. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Putting yourself in their
Yeah.
shoes is the most important thing you can do from a perspective of goal setting, feedback, all the things we just talked about that lead to success.
I'm glad that you brought up the questioning piece. A lot of people don't understand the difference between coaching and consulting, and I get that question all the time. But in my mind, the difference is that I'm asking questions and asking questions that guide them to help find solutions, right? Rather than as a consultant, I'm saying, this is what I would do, right?
It sounds less judgmental. No one likes to be judged. No one likes to be over on the other side of the desk having someone say, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you're not doing this. How do you think you're doing?
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah. It'll come out.
And this is a conversation, difficult conversations with employees, adults are always take their toll on you, right? Someone taught me early on in my management career that you don't take that home over the weekend. If you've got a difficult conversation you have that Friday at 5 or Friday. Don't bring that home with you over the weekend and let it eat on you all weekend. That eats into your self-care. You can't have a good weekend if you've got that head hanging over your head. So I've always been very upfront. You said, how can you have those difficult conversations? I would be dreading a conversation, and my wife, I would share with her, oh, I have stress, and here's what it looks like. And she would say, oh, how are you going to do that? And I'm like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. I'd drift off to sleep. She'd stay up all night worrying about it. So I knew someone was worrying about it, so that's all that really matters. But it was, I think just being upfront is how you do it. You don't judge them, but you coach them along and, again, ask the right questions. They know.
Yeah.
They have the answer.
You talked about not ending the week by taking it home with you. Is there anything special you do at the beginning of the week to kick off the week on the right foot?
So it depends on where the person is. And, I've coached a lot of salespeople over the years. Recently, since I've been at TWG, we had a Monday morning kickoff meeting, which is just a gathering of sales folks saying, how was last week? What did you accomplish last week? Did you do the right activities? Did you exhibit the right behaviors? Did you have the right meetings? And what's your plan for this week? What'd you do last week? What are you going to do this week? And it puts a kind of a focus on the activities that we've already identified in your goal setting session, that these are the activities that lead to success, but are you doing them? And who are you doing them with? And put them down in writing and share them with your peers. There's a lot going on there from an accountability standpoint. And if someone's going to BS their way through that, boy, week after week after week, it's going to become evident.
Yeah.
And people will learn from that. They'll feel the energy from the group and self-correct. I've seen people self-correct and show tremendous growth from that. So we've had a good experience with that. We don't do it all the time, but we did it for 2 straight years. And guess what? We got some great data. We know what our closing ratio, we know how many meetings we have to have, we know how many proposals we have to do to get to a new client. So Guess what? We
so
focus on those
valuable.
meetings and those proposals. Those are the key activities. So we know what that ratio is, and it's going up. And that's the good news. Is we just need to have more of those.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. I love that strategy to kick it off. And that accountability piece, that's how, it's why I see my Aspire to Achieve program. We come together once a month for 45 minutes to check in on what did you achieve over the last month based off of what you committed to last time, right? Where did you stand? What challenges did you come up against? And people don't want to show up to that meeting having not accomplished what they committed to last month. That's
absolutely.
for sure. It's a lot easier to let ourselves down than to disappoint those around us. At least I feel it is.
And I think we can probably tie that to someone taught me a long time ago, and I talk like I'm 100 years old, but I'm not really. If you want someone to learn some material, challenge them to teach it. Nobody prepares any better than someone who has to present to a group certain material. They're going to know it inside and out.
Yeah.
We did that back at BK in safety meetings. Each employee from the warehouse, this is your week. Tomorrow we're going to have a safety meeting. Here's a single sheet. You need to cover this. You're going to speak to the others about how to lift property, or what to do if you have a flat tire out on the road in a delivery van. Proper operation of a forklift or whatever.
Yeah.
Depending on their level of expertise. And they didn't like it, but guess what? They learned it.
It works.
They learned it, and they
definitely
knew
works.
exactly how to present it to their peers.
I use that strategy in the classroom all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And I agree. And it has worked for me as well. I don't know it all when it comes to leadership development, but as I continue to learn new things, I go out and I spread, what I'm learning with other people. And I feel like every time I teach it to someone else, it's more ingrained in me and I have a better understanding.
And in those Monday morning those Monday morning kickoff meetings, there's another sports reference. It's we have to be careful. There are public goals and private goals. We're not talking about private goals. These are public goals. Everyone has the same goals. We've identified the same activities for everyone.
Yeah.
But even those, sharing those public goals and holding them accountable to them, it's powerful.
Yeah. I love that. All right. You also talk a lot about, obviously, you've been in a sales environment for so long, and that can be high stress. How do you focus in on helping others to value lifelong learning in the way that you do? So obviously it's been a big part of your growth, but how about kind of reinforcing that for others and helping use that to hit sales targets?
Well, again, I think it goes back to goal setting. I mean, those are things that are important to their career, but also understanding what's important. They may have goals. I have people now whose goals for themselves are bigger than what the company goals are.
Gotcha.
For them. Wow.
That's what
When did that happen?
It's what it takes to motivate some, though.
Well, and it makes me feel good about, okay, we hired the right person here. This is fantastic. And I think that's very rewarding. And I think that it reinforces, their commitment to it.
Yeah.
The lifelong learning piece, like I said, in our industry, it's kind of built in.
Yeah.
And we encourage that. We pay for it. We give them time to seek a certain certification if they want to. If it applies to their job, we certainly want to encourage that. And they look around them. They see those plaques hanging on the walls in people's office, the partners and the leaders of the company, and they say, "Oh, they have that certification. They have that certification. Maybe I need to look into that and see what that is." So it's important that they see that at the top.
Yeah.
And it helps. It helps motivate everyone.
Before setting a goal and determining where you're headed, I believe it's helpful to see where you are currently and using assessment tools to do so. You know that I use the DISC assessment a lot. I love Working Genius assessment. There are so many. I believe that you use some assessments at TWG.
We do.
Tell me a little bit about those assessments and what value you see in those.
Oh, they definitely have a value, and they're part of the process. We like the interview, the casual interview. We like we check all the credentials. Those are two big important pieces in our industry. But the third part is that testing. We use something called Caliper, and it's a personality assessment, and what attributes of their personality might contribute to success in a particular role. There are different tests for different positions. Are you service oriented? Are you sales oriented? Are you detail oriented? Or are you not detail oriented? Things like that we know are associated with success. Now, having said that, it's not always 100% correct. I think it's a snapshot of that person that day. Probably it's the most likely way that they're going to behave. But where it's not just an academic pass-fail grade, it is a great tool for coaching and managing. This is how Sierra wants to communicate. This is how she's going to react to stress. And there have been times when I say, wow, they don't seem to be handling this position this situation very well. Pop open that test, look, there's why.
Yeah.
I forgot that part. I need to help them through that by doing the things outlined there.
Yeah.
So they're very helpful tools. We're big fans of it. Sometimes it throws us a curveball. Sometimes it shows a result that we didn't see coming. But there's always an explanation, and there's always detail there to help you figure that out.
Yeah. I think it's important to remember, like what you said, it is just one part of the screening process. That you take all of the components and look at them together.
Sure.
I'm doing candidate screening right now for one of my clients, and it always starts with them interviewing first, focusing on industry knowledge and the things that they care about and they want to see. Then they pass the person to me. I do the reference calls. I do my DISC assessment and emotional intelligence assessment, and I do a second interview that's more focused on personal goals, professional goals, their values, right? Just seeing them in a different, way. And it always shocks the candidate when I send them their assessment report. It's 45 pages. I send it to them and I say, this is a valuable tool. Whether you end up here or not, take this, use this as a tool for your own growth. And they're like, wait, I just get to take this? I'm like, well, I don't know why I keep it from you. So it's such a beneficial tool for everybody. And I think, especially as they're getting started in a new role, kind of a starting place for conversation about strengths and areas for growth, where they might not want to point out their areas for growth, right? In a new position, but it's in black and white on paper, and it makes it easier to discuss what came out here.
Sure. It's fun to see what they disagree with. I disagree with that,
It's the high dominance people that disagree and say, I'm not that dominant. And then their delivery, I'm like, oh no, you are.
You are,
actually.
Or you wouldn't have said that.
What you just said to me proved that this is accurate. But yes, I love assessments as a tool for identifying areas for growth and goal setting as well. Thinking about moments in your career that really stand out, has there been a challenging moment that significantly influenced this leadership philosophy that kind of guides your actions today?
I'm not sure I would say, I can't really think of a single situation that influenced it. It's probably just a conglomerate of experiences. But later in life, when we sold BK and that was acquired, and if you've never been part of an acquisition one way or another, either way, whether you're the person buying or the person selling, it's very, very difficult. It was probably the most difficult thing I've done in my business career, because you become, as a leader, you become the liaison between the old and the new. And it's very taxing physically and mentally. And it teaches you a lot about human nature and about your employees. And boy, I would have liked to have had some DISC assessments to refer to during that. I might have headed off a few situations, but in the end, it all worked out fine. You're going to lose some people. Some people are going to say, I don't like the new, I'm out. Sometimes the new might say, we don't need you or you're out. But those of you that are left are challenged to change your perspective. I know we've done it that way, for 30 years, but here's how it's going to be going forward. And then sometimes it just means saying, I don't know the answer, but let's brainstorm and let's offer an alternative. We don't like what we're hearing. Let's go, and we can't do it the old way for any particular reason. But what about a middle ground? Offer a solution. Don't just complain, and don't say I hate this. We've never done it like that. Say, what if we did it like this? Maybe that would be better than either proposed solution. So it was a very trying time, and I learned a lot from it. And I still talk to the folks at Miller's from time to time, and go to events over there, and still have a great relationship. So, and most of the people did stay, and I think they've done well.
I have not been a part of one of those before, so it's very interesting to me. I'm sure I'm trying to picture all of the challenges that would present themselves when you're trying to change the way things have been done for so long. And I don't think I'd want to go through that, actually.
Well, yeah. Well, no one wants to, but I mean, you at some point you make a commitment to seeing it through, and you do it.
Yeah.
Just imagine every process and every little things that you haven't even thought that are part of your daily process. It's changing. Or one day you go somewhere to look for something and it's gone. Oh, we don't do it that way anymore.
Yeah.
It's just, it's hard not to take it personally, and that's the biggest challenge. It's hard not to take all that personally. Eventually, you can only say, "Oh, okay," so many times before you say, "Okay." It affects your outlook.
Yeah. If this was so taxing on you, I'm wondering how it impacted you on the personal side of life, because, of course, one of my other questions always has to do with balance and whether or not you believe balance is possible, and if so, what it looks like for you. What did balance look like at that time?
I was out of balance, for sure. I don't think we ever get 50-50, even balance, whatever you want to call it. I think it's a constant battle to balance that. Sometimes it's 60-40, sometimes it's 70-30. At that point, I was working long days, long hours, not getting to golf, not getting the downtime I needed, and it took its toll physically. It also kept me away from home, kept me from talking to my kids as much as I normally did. So it definitely takes things out of whack. And it was evident for a while. There was about a 3-year stretch. Okay. Really out of balance the first year, better the second, much better the third, because things had settled. But I think balance for me, it's, do you get the proper amount of sleep? Do you get the right food? Do you get the right amount of exercise and work? Is the job still satisfying to you?
Yeah.
I feel like I will always need to be part of something. I don't know if I'll ever retire and be completely out of the business world. I like being part of a team, having goals, being part of a success mission, if you will, helping other people reach their goals. I think that's all satisfying to me. So there has to be some of that in there somewhere. But seeing some friends who just retire and don't do anything, they all end up doing something, right?
Yeah. But
it's interesting to see what they're doing and how they're getting their satisfaction and balance out of that.
Yeah. I am always anxious to hear the response on balance. I know that you seem to focus a lot on your health and taking care of yourself. So from my perspective, you appear to lead a very balanced life.
It's constant battle.
Yeah, that's understandable, especially when you're leading a team.
Sure.
Yeah. Thinking about your dedication to continuous improvement, both personally and professionally, is there any area in which you are specifically growing right now, or you have goals for growth?
My plate is pretty full with my job. Constantly learning new things there in the insurance world. And that's, like we discussed, that's kind of built in. So I keep that going all the time. I'm rereading. I like to read for enjoyment, read for pleasure. But all the self-help books that I've read over the years, I get satisfaction going back and reading them at different points in my life. Right now I'm rereading Dale Carnegie's How to Influence Friends, or How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I was watching, this is a silly TV reference, but Young Sheldon the other night, show. Which I have put off because I love Big Bang, but I hadn't watched this. We started watching the early episodes, and someone gives him that book because he got that from the librarian, I think. And then his sister pointed out, "Oh, read who checked that out, and they're probably trying to make friends too. You should call those people." And that was kind of funny. But that's a book that was written in the 30s, I believe. Does it still apply? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm having fun going back through that. But, I've read Covey and Jeffrey Gitomer and Dale Carnegie and, and more recently, Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last. I always call that the wind blows hard at the top, but you eat well, right? So with leadership, there comes a lot of responsibility, and it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard. And the wind, sometimes the currents are swift. But if you do it right and you figure it out, there are rewards there. And then something a coworker recommended, Atomic Habits. That's interesting. I'm not into really complex processes. If there's more than 7 habits I need, 7 points I need to remember from a book, I'm probably not going to.
There's a lot to remember in all of these books.
That's probably not going to.
Your memory probably isn't what it used to, is it?
Thank you, Sierra. I appreciate you pointing that out. Your well-seasoned friend. But I think knowing that there's resources out there helps that there's no finish line mentality. There's plenty of stuff out there. And my recommendation to the millennials out there who are evolving into leaders and are leaders, you should read some of this. I've spoken to classes up at Shenandoah's University's Business School, and I mentioned Dale Carnegie, and they're like, who? Mm-hmm. And they don't know. Well, guess what? God help them if they get out in the business world and they have to lead a team, and they've got someone like me on that team. They better be able to associate with me and understand my thinking. And I think in order to do that, you have to look back what molded us, what molded the people on your team, and what belief system or philosophy do they have, and how does that match with yours? And I think any of those books would be helpful.
Yeah, those are all great resources. All the ones that you named, I've read, by the way. And when I'm in front of a group of people and I mention a book and I say, raise your hand if you've read this before, and not a hand goes up, and they're all in leadership roles, it's always a shock to my system. But then it goes back to what you said earlier about not realizing everybody's not raised the same way as you, right? Sure. This has always been important to me. I've always wanted to grow, read, achieve more, do more, right?
Sure.
And so if I'm taking on a role, I'm going to read about it because I want to do my absolute best in that position. So it's not like that for everyone. So let's just say we have someone listening that says, I don't have time to read a book. What can we do? What are some options for folks?
Well, they have lots of options now. They can download it. They can listen to it while they work out or on a walk, or listen to it while they drive. If they're a commuter, that's great time. I mean, back in my time, we had CDs. You put that disc in your car and leave a series of 5 or 6 discs in your car on a day like we've had lately in the 90s and 100 degrees. And guess what? They're no good later. They're funny looking when you go back. But nowadays, it's on their phones. All these books are at their fingertips, and there's no excuse for it.
Actually, I don't know if you've heard of Blinkist before, but
condensed
but those that haven't, it's great to even just search a topic. Like, I want to learn more about. Yesterday, I was teaching trust, the trusted leader, and if you search trust, all of these books come up, but they're usually 10 to 15 minute summaries of the key points of the books that you can listen to. And I love listening to those while I drive, because I can't sit down and consume as much information reading as I used to. That's for sure. I spend a lot of time on the road. But if I can get these like quick easy glimpses, it actually tells me what books I want to purchase and take the time to read the full book. So I get the key points out and I decide, do I actually want to spend my money on that book?
I always think it's interesting when a concept from the 70s comes back around and they rename it. You know, it used to be called Cliff Notes.
Oh yeah,
yeah. If you
Cliff
didn't,
Notes.
if you didn't read the book and you had to do a presentation,
Yeah.
you did the Cliff Notes because you didn't have time to read the whole thing. But
Yeah.
Blinkless, yes, I like it.
Yeah, it's a great tool. Great tool. Okay, so you've shared a lot about opportunities for personal and professional growth, and I appreciate that. Any final words of wisdom for folks out there that either maybe they're not in a leadership position yet, but they're still influencing people in some capacity? They might not have the title. If they could focus on one area to start with, where should they focus their growth?
Oh, I would say read everything you can, do the research, and find out as much information you can about relationships and develop good relationships with people. I think that will serve you well going forward, whether it's in your personal life or your business career, whether you're being coached or you're doing the coaching. If you understand how relationships work, I think that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm not surprised you chose that, actually. And when I think of TWG, I think of relationships because I'm pretty close to a lot of people there, but that always stood out about your culture there. It's all about building the relationship, and you can tell people care about you. So I don't think that was read in a book necessarily. It's just become ingrained in people, and they probably, as you guys have hired, you've looked for folks that value those relationships. But I love that recommendation, getting started there.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
I approve. Stamp of approval.
Yay.
Well, I thank you so much for being
Sure.
here, Mark. Your commitment to helping others grow really stands out to me. And I just wanted to take a moment to, of course, share. If you have not had the opportunity to subscribe, I'd love for you to subscribe so you get notifications every time a new episode comes out at noon Eastern Standard Time on Fridays, always on Spotify and YouTube first, and then all of the other platforms follow. In each of these episodes, I am sharing a branching out challenge, and you're not going to be surprised by this week's challenge. It is really to just identify an area in which you want to learn something new, something you want to grow in. Even at the end of every day, I like to ask myself, what is one way that I grew today? What is one new thing I learned today? You could certainly just do a quick reflection at the end of the day and identify places where you've learned something. But I find it easiest to learn when you're constantly asking questions. So be curious, keep asking questions. And until next time, keep branching out.